Welcome, Sarah. I'm so glad that you're here today. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you
Um,
so much. Thank you for
Yay!
having me.
This is just so exciting to be together on this at this auspicious time of year too. We're coming close to solstice, and I feel like your work is so tuned into the cycles and the seasons of life, little cycles, medium cycles, and huge cycles that we are in. So I want to introduce everyone to Sarah Breskman Cosme. I'm
You
saying
did
that
it
right.
right.
I did
Yeah.
it. Yay! And Sarah is a hypnotist, board certified. Is that the right terminology?
hmm Yeah.
Hypnotist, and also, what's so amazing about your work, I think, is you've studied this with some of the masters. Brian Weiss. Is that correct? And then also
hmm
Dolores Cannon, but then Julia Cannon, her daughter, too. And
hmm
I don't know if this is still true, but the last I heard, you were one of 14 people in the world who had the level of certification that you have in past life work.
I was, but now there's a few more. I
Okay.
believe there are like 20.
Well, one of 20 in this great big world is still pretty fascinating and amazing. And so
Mhm.
all your accomplishments, like I know you were a counselor before this and you've just
Mhm.
given so much. The first time I heard you in an interview, and I just felt so excited to meet with you and work with you on a past life regression, and I'm really grateful that I've had that experience too. So welcome. I have so many things to ask you. Do you
You
want
can
to?
ask me anything.
I know it's so exciting. Do you want to say anything about your journey to getting into
Sure.
this work of past life regression?
Sure. I just started out like most people, just somebody who had a lot of problems. And I had so many problems. I was really overweight. I had phobias and fears, and I had OCD where I would open and close drawers. And I didn't know what was going on with me because I was just a kid. And then I was like this hypochondriac super manifester where like if my friends had an issue, I could think about it enough and get the same issue or anybody just by hearing about it. So then I had trouble sleeping because I heard people have trouble sleeping and I had all different kinds of issues. And they never got any better. I mean, I didn't really know what was wrong with me, but they didn't get any better. But something really life changing happened to me. When I came back home to my family's house, it was like a couple months after I started college, and I walked through the front door, and there's a mirror that you see right when you walk through the front door. And I just glanced at myself in the mirror, and I was shocked because while I was away for those couple months, I had lost like a ton of weight. I mean, it looked in the mirror like I had lost 20 pounds in just a couple months. I I noticed, and it was like this aha moment. I noticed that I had forgotten to have all my problems when I was away. And then I thought about it and I was like, what has happened to me? And I realized in that moment that I had changed my thought patterns because I had changed my environment. So just moving out of that environment changed all my patterns, including my thought patterns. And I was like, this is so life changing. But who was I going to share it with? So I continued and I graduated. And then I got an internship where my job was basically to counsel the halfway house residents and to give them medication. That was my job. And it didn't take me more than maybe a week to feel as if every single thing I learned was a lie. I mean, honestly, I discovered so many things that were shocking just being in that field. It seemed like the residents were actually lab rats because they would be tested on weekly and they were wearing wristbands, one that were on the test medications, so that if they were to die, we would call this number and let them know that this medication wasn't
Wow.
wasn't working. And it was so horrendous. And plus, these were beautiful people, and I just wanted to help them. I mean, all my life, I've just really wanted to help other people. So here I thought this was the best way to help people. And I get into this field and just, I couldn't even believe it. I was like, wow, is anything I've learned, true? So I didn't become a psychologist. Instead, I stopped doing that. And eventually I got into hypnosis. And of course, find something that worked. And doing quit smoking and lose weight, they were okay, but nothing compared to past life regression because somebody could actually come in for a session and heal themselves. So I delved into that. Then I studied with Brian Weiss. And then after doing that for a while, I thought, well, there's something missing. I feel like there's something else I'm supposed to be doing, but I don't know what. So I eventually found Dolores Cannon and I got really good at her method. I worked my way up from a level 1 to a level 3 practitioner. And then I was teaching all around the world with Julia Cannon, her daughter, before the quarantine. And now I wrote a book and I'm, putting all this stuff out there, which is quite a wild ride, honestly. It's very exciting and I feel really humbled, to be in this position,
Yeah.
honestly.
Well, this book, I don't know if it's backwards for the way that you folks see it,
No.
but it is so incredible. I just read it for the second time. But your very specific gift that you've been given is that people are coming to you unrelated that have the very specific same stories about Atlantis
Mhm.
and Lemuria.
I thought it was a coincidence at first. I thought maybe other practitioners were just having clients that always went to these same lifetimes during the same period of time. But after one after another kept coming and sharing their stories. And I knew where they were right away as soon as he regressed. And then I realized that it wasn't a coincidence that I was supposed to share this. But that's one of the reasons why wrote this book because I know people can read it and find healing, very deep healing, just from reading the words. And the reason I know that truly is because it happened to me, not with reading, but I know I had a session where I was giving the session and they remembered me in a past life. And it was when I dislocated my shoulder in this other lifetime. And I didn't think anything about their past life, remembering me. I didn't think anything of it until the next day when I realized my shoulder had been healed because I'd always had an issue with this shoulder, just not really thinking it was related. So I know that all someone has to do is to resonate or even read the words or hear this story, and they can heal on so many different levels. They don't have to experience any of the the remembering. A
Yeah.
lot of times they know they're feeling something, like they might get goosebumps or something, but
Yeah.
they don't really quite know what, but it's enough to really help them profoundly.
That makes sense. Now, back us up for anyone that doesn't know what Atlantis is or what Lemuria is, and maybe people have read books or think it's legend or myth. Certainly Plato and Edgar Casey, I think, too,
Hmm.
wrote about these civilizations. We can trust that there is something to this more than just. What do you say to the skeptics? That's also something I'm curious about.
Well, I was a skeptic too. I didn't really know much about this, and I come from a more scientific background. So I was a skeptic until I got a crash course in everything through regressing, these people. But I didn't start out into metaphysics. It just made its way into my life. And I think it's good to have some degree of skepticism in a way where you don't just allow things to be proven, yourself to believe things until you prove it to yourself, until it resonates within you.
Yeah.
But Atlantis was a huge continent in the Atlantic Ocean, and they were very highly advanced because they had technology that was left over from some ancient aliens. Also, the founder of the most recent Atlantis was an extraterrestrial who was able to salvage some of his technology. So he used it to create what Atlantis is. And a lot of times when people are regressed and they go to other planets, it's in the same design as Atlantis was, because that's how they designed civilizations on some other planets.
Oh,
So,
that's interesting because I think I had told you this that I had had a regression with someone else a couple of different times and Atlantis came up, but it was a different Atlantis. And I'm sure it was a long time span that Atlantis was in existence anyway, but
mhm.
it was a different type of reality. Maybe it wasn't as heavy as it perhaps got to before. Anyway,
Well, it
I'm getting ahead of everything.
Well, no, I mean, it Atlantis seemed to have lasted for thousands of years, at least. So there were many times during Atlantis's history where it did have like a golden age where people were, able to use their mind in different ways. Um, because they were hybrids. They were human and alien. They had been created that way. So they had abilities. And after they overthrew their oppressor, they were able to use their minds until they were controlled once again towards the
Mhm.
end of Atlantis. But there were many different beautiful time periods in Atlantis, but it wasn't my job to report on those because all my clients that came just talked about the last time in Atlantis. Um, but Atlantis could be described as a very high, highly technologically advanced society, one that was kind of centered around greed and control towards its end, and very male dominated, very
Yeah.
masculine. Whereas Lemuria was really described as a matriarchal society where it was a very beautiful and compassionate place to live. There was no competition, nobody got sick, and also people really genuinely loved one another and helped one another. It was very feminine, so to
Mm.
speak. And they were not advanced with their technology. They were advanced with their spirituality.
Interesting. And to have science develop really quickly and really strongly without consciousness, like
Mhm.
connection and consciousness. And some of the different stories in your book really demonstrate how we can lose touch with what's really important and really lose course around compassion and just basic human decency, or not necessarily just human decency but just basic
Right.
decency. Yeah.
Right. We're supposed to advance with both, with the
Yeah.
compassion and our technology. And that's why I think a lot of beings that come through, or higher selves that come through sessions, are excited because this is such a great time period. I mean, it doesn't look like it, but we're really doing so much better.
Yeah.
And the reason is humanity doesn't advance like this, it goes in cycles. So the fact that we're back here again is so amazing because it means we're doing better. And I keep hearing these amazing messages that we're doing better, that things are right on track. I mean, there might be some chaos and things are difficult for a little while, but it seems like everybody seems so, higher self seems so positive.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe some of the things that are disturbing to people just seem bigger now because we are more aware of what is
Yeah.
right and wrong. And there's maybe a
Right.
numbness when we're not aware of what's going on and all the intricacies of how people are being treated. And yeah,
Oh,
I
definitely.
yeah, I just so Atlantis was a male dominated
Hmm.
science above connection kind of
Hmm.
place at the end of its cycle.
Right.
In contrast, Lemuria was all about connection, all about everyone had enough food, everyone had
Hmm.
a role, everyone was celebrated. There was so much love and so much connection and so much beauty too. It's amazing to hear people that don't know each other from your book talk about the flowers and the rolling
Oh,
hillsides. It's it's incredible. And so this to me is science. When you have things repeating themselves over and over again with people that you don't,
yeah.
they haven't talked to each other and they haven't read a book about it. And some of them didn't even have any knowledge of any of these places, right? Before you regress
Yeah.
them.
I prefer to only use people who don't have any previous knowledge because I want to be able to trust the information too. And I don't want it to be influenced at all. But these were people that didn't know anything about Lemuria or Atlantis, especially Jen, the main subject that I used for my book. I knew that she didn't know anything about these places because she was my friend. And we used to sit after school almost every single day and talk about things. But not anything, spiritual. And I knew before going into our first session that she had no background knowledge of Dolores Cannon or of Atlantis or Lemuria. Not that those were the first things I asked her, but the only thing spiritual that she was into at all was she was curious about Esther Hicks. And she was thinking about buying an Esther Hicks book. That was it. I mean, very, just not really into any of that stuff because she was also into science. I mean, she was a teacher at the school. So she had a background in regular science and history, and that's what she taught to the kids. But that was about to change after our first session.
Well, and she really helped you to uncover your role as well,
Yeah.
did she not?
Yeah, she really did. Well, I didn't know my part to play in any of this at all. And actually, I learned first that I had been a judge in Atlantis. I had no idea. I learned this at one of the classes, one of the QHHT classes that I was assisting Julia in. And it was in Miami, of all places. And as part of the class, people take turns and they practice on me, like in front of the group, in front
Yeah.
of this large class. So they were practicing on me, and I was regressed to being a judge in Atlantis. And I realized it was at the time that my job was to decide who would stay or who would go after the jab side effects got really bad in Atlantis. Wasn't sure if I could say that word. So,
Yeah, no, that's totally okay. So, for people that haven't read your book, basically you learned that they were doing experiments on people. And
right.
so, right? And they were trying to cure
They,
disease
yes, they were doing
desperately.
experiments desperately. They were trying to do experiments on people, and they were trying to cure disease. And the Atlanteans were trying to figure out why the Lemurians, who were not as advanced with their technology, had immunity and they were not getting sick. The Atlanteans had such high, technology that they could go in these travel spheres where it was almost like a stealth technology where people wouldn't be able to see you from the outside. So they went to Lemuria and they were trying to figure out why are these people not getting sick? But there was a special immunity that the Lemurians had where they still had childbirth or pain during childbirth and issues like that, but they didn't experience sickness. So the Atlanteans were dealing with a very deadly issue that was plaguing their continent, and they really desperately needed to. Can I say the
Yeah,
word, or I'm
yeah,
not sure?
yeah.
Desperately needed to come up with a vaccine. I'm talking about the vaccine in Atlantis so that they could, help their people because people were dying in Atlantis. So um, they went as part of their mission. They went and they um, wanted to get the technology that the Lemurians had, for their immunity, but the Lemurians couldn't give them their technology because it was a gift to them from their star ancestors. So they couldn't give them this immunity. It was like kind of created as a bubble around their civilization. But the Atlanteans got mad. So they took someone as a prisoner and destroyed the whole continent through this atomic like device that created this huge wave, and it just totally destroyed everything in its wake and sunk the continent. The reason why it was so powerful was because it was using this type of technology. It wasn't like a regular wave that would recede. It actually sunk the continent in the South Pacific. That they took someone as a prisoner, and which was my client, and she was able to recount 60 years of being in a prison in Atlantis. So she understood what they were doing to the people. So they developed first vaccine they developed, it seemed like a huge success. And people were celebrating. All of a sudden, they could come out of their quarantine that they had there. And they were so happy for the first time in a while. And it was so great for everybody until the first set of babies started being born with these horrific side effects, where they were born with animal like parts and DNA. And after a while, they just couldn't really conform to society because they were so mistreated. And so my job as a judge was to decide who would stay in Atlantis and who would go to this island. I was told that this island would take care, on the island, there was a facility where they would take care of these animal children, where they would give them food and shelter and help them and just create a new life for them. But what I found out was that they were not being taken care of at all. In fact, it was a lie. They were just being killed. And what's interesting about this, that I have to say, before I went to this class to do this and do the regression, not that I knew I was going to be doing that, but I had clients that same week that remembered being on this island and that they were being killed and they were animal
Hybrids.
people. Yeah, and like there are no coincidences.
Wow.
But when I was in the class being regressed, I remembered that when I finally did get to go to the island, there was dust everywhere and it was causing me to cough. And what I didn't notice because I was under hypnosis is the class was coughing. And after I came out, we all realized that it was a group regression because they were all there as well.
That's
One person
incredible.
completely healed themselves after that experience. Another person's son, who she remembered being an animal child, healed the strange cough that all of a sudden developed before, this class and was gone right after the information came out. So I think part of it is just people want to understand really what happened and be validated
Mhm.
in their own feelings that something like this could have happened, just to know that it did happen and that they're not alone with these feelings.
So
Yeah.
we've had conversations about the thing
Yeah.
or not the thing, and I know you're not
Right.
saying that this is the same as that time, but I
Right.
think it brings to heart understanding of some people may have desires to make a choice one way, and some people may have a desire to make a choice in a different direction, and that we just need to honor all of those choices that people make. And
Right.
if they no matter what it is, they've chosen it and they've signed up for it at a higher level, whether it's a good thing or whether it's something that we don't fully understand.
Right. Oh, definitely. And, you know, it really depends on the person's belief system, it seems like. Because if you believe strongly that something will be good for you, then it will be, if that's really your belief system. But for some people, this whole experience is completely triggering because they have a sense that this has happened to them before, or that something about this is not feeling correct within themselves. And it's really hard if you were there in the past going through it again. It's very triggering.
Doesn't that make sense? And instead of labeling people as, anti something, that
Right.
yeah, and just to really honor each other and all the choices that we make. And also, I think it's interesting that there's going back, way back, that there were powers that they were given too from these experiments,
Yes.
right? Tell us about
I
that.
think that's I think that's one of the most important messages that came through about the vaccine experiments in Atlantis was that these children were born with these horrific side effects. At least that's what they thought at first. I mean, they looked different. Some of them were deformed and stuff, and they had like tails or gills and things like that. And you could still see this flowing lightly through our genes now. I mean, some people are still born with gills or a tail or things like that.
Yeah.
But what's important to understand is that they realized that these children had these abilities and they could tune in and tap into crystals, they could tap into the ley lines. They had so many abilities because of the side effect. And that is something that you can see going on even nowadays with the savants, because the savants, while it's called a disability and people consider it a disability, there's an obvious ability that's happening to these
Mhm.
people where there's a channel that's open in their mind that other regular people without this disability don't have, where
Yeah.
they could remember things that are just seem unbelievable to most people. So there's an ability. And I think what we were supposed to do back in Atlantis was we were supposed to understand this and move forward
Yeah.
with bringing in those abilities. So nothing in this universe ever happens to us by accident. all of it happens for a greater purpose, and we're supposed to learn from it. And we can use anything. I mean, basically everything has, a benefit to it, even if it seems like a negative.
This past life trauma, there's one thing having anxiety over trauma from this life, and goodness knows some people might be thinking I have enough trauma in this life let alone do it.
I
but
know, right?
but these are cataclysmic, and significant in terms of those cycles we were talking about at the beginning. And as you're talking about this, I'm thinking about people with those coughs, or people with a fear of water that were in
Mhm.
Lemuria and are, experience the wave. Carolyn, she has always been terrified of tsunamis and waves, and it's been
Mhm.
so strong in her. And having known her so long, it's an irrational fear. Like, she can't even see a wave on TV, and she has to run because it's so traumatic to her. So I
Right.
can only imagine. I'm saying all this because I can only imagine the number of people that you've been able to help through life blockages.
It is quite incredible, and I feel really honored to be able to do this work. But there were so many people that were there, and a lot of higher selves have told me that we are all back here again. I mean, most of the people on the planet right now were either in Atlantis during that time or Lemuria. And we came back here for this time period because this is such a great opportunity time to release these traumas, that if we can do it in this life, that it won't affect our next lives. But we all agreed to come back at this time because after those civilizations were destroyed, there was so much karma, so much trauma to account for. So
Yeah,
we all got together, and we decided, well, what are we going to do about this? So we
yeah,
decided to come back now.
yeah,
And the time is ripe for it because we're all being triggered. And it's
yeah,
really ripe to release this trauma now and to
yeah,
move past it. And you don't have to remember your part to play.
yeah.
You can just hear about it.
You can just connect with the energies of these places, right? And
Well, it's really interesting because I don't know when it came out, but there's a Netflix series, or there was, called Sweet Tooth, about these human animal hybrids. And it has to do with a virus in a vaccine. And so, why did that come out right now?
somebody's
All of a
consciousness.
sudden. Exactly. Well, I think when when you're creating something, it's being downloaded or given to you from
Yeah,
somewhere. So
yeah.
I'm sure this is just everywhere in our collective consciousness right
It,
now.
it's amazing. It's just amazing. And I mean, it makes me think, like, years and years ago, I dabbled in a little bit of fiction, and it was when I was living in Costa Rica for a couple months, and I was walking the ocean and sitting and writing at the ocean, and I had this whole ocean story, and the kids loved it. I never did anything with it. But and then when I had my regression with you, it was this whole lifetime underwater, which I was not
Yeah.
expecting. I mean, I was bipedal, I guess you could say. Like, I had legs and arms, but I could breathe underwater. It was a totally different, it was not what I expected. I realized after even my own experience with the regression, the connection that it had to what was literally going on in my life at that moment, which was my dance between being solo and being connected in community, and living on the West Coast so far away from my community, and then coming back here, being on a path to come back to Ontario to where my people are. And that was really what that regression was all about. It was that feeling of, I mean, in that lifetime, there was such an equality and such a deep, yeah, a deep connection with all of us. And it didn't matter who you were. And just one more self disclosure, not to make this about me, but I'd been going through things in my family where there was people not being treated equally and not being treated fairly. And so that really, it wasn't a traumatic memory, but it plugged me into the remembering of this is how it can be. And it can be that way here too. And it is that
Mhm.
way. It doesn't have to be the way that, you know, it is.
Yeah, exactly. and it's funny too how you'll be shown these messages that are so in tune with what you're going on now that it's so there are no coincidences. This is just the route of transmission that they have, to give you
Yeah.
this information.
Yeah. Well, this is not totally related, but have you ever regressed someone to when they were just an animal, like an eagle or a
Oh
dolphin?
yeah.
Have
Oh my
you?
gosh, it's so fascinating. Yeah. Like eagles, the way they have these like infrared they can see things, and the objects like their prey lights up and it looks red to them at night. They have really profound vision. And it just seems like such a nice life. I mean, it's different than a human. They don't have the same emotional body, but bears seem to. I mean, I had this one client who was a bear and her cubs had left and she was really lonely and thought about her cubs all the time.
Mhm.
And she just
Wow.
like, went through the woods and missed her cubs. And it's like,
Oh,
oh, I didn't know that bears experienced that.
that's really interesting. Wow. I mean, it's incredible. It's just everything you're saying. I think the one thing that really strikes me that you've said today is that we all have been, like the majority of us, or if have been there in one
Yeah.
of those civilizations.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what I've been told.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you can kind of get us, I mean, maybe we're both, but you can kind of tell which one you lean closer to.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
mean, some of the things that I've heard from higher selves is that if you resonate more strongly with Atlantis, you're the first one to buy the new iPhone. You have the newest technology, and you're so excited by technology, and you just can't wait to see what else will come about, and that's great. And then the people from Lemire, you don't understand why people can't communicate heart to heart.
Yeah.
You want to eat more plant-based or whatever it is that brings you closer to that civilization, you know.
Fascinating. Fascinating. Wow. Well, what is one of the most interesting things you've done in the last few weeks in terms of regressing someone? Can you think of something that
Oh
jumps out
gosh.
at you?
Well, everything is so interesting. I mean, one thing that I think is interesting is it's the holiday season. So people have been asking about narcissists a lot. And I'm sure in your work, you deal with narcissists a lot, but the higher self gave such great advice. So I just thought it was really interesting. So I'll tell you what it was. I mean, you're a therapist, but they were saying, there's just two rules that you can follow to really deal with a narcissist to create boundaries around yourself. And when a narcissist is in like an attack mode, this is from the higher self, not me, but when the narcissist is in an attack mode and asking you a question, don't answer the question. That's number one. And number two is answer back with a question. If you just do those two simple rules, you can create a boundary around yourself and you can live with this person or be in that energy. But I thought that was really helpful because when you think about it or you practice doing something like that, it really is life changing, just those two simple rules. But oh my gosh, I've had so many really interesting sessions recently.
Every day must be interesting, right?
Every
Every
day is
single day. You also see people in the Keys, which interestingly, is that not like a really close in proximity to where?
it is. Well, what's really fascinating is I never knew why I moved to the Keys. I just don't like the cold weather. So I moved to the Keys because I wanted to be close to warm weather. And I find out later that I'm at the closest point to where I passed in that lifetime. I had no idea. It's funny how you find out these things later. Like there is a reason for everything. There's always a reason where you move or, you know, because there's so many energies around where you're living. And a lot of times people seem to move back to where they used to live in a past life. It's really interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah. Or
And
they
then,
meet the same people.
right, right. And past lives have always made sense to me because when someone walks into a room and you just know them, there was just never an
Mhm.
explanation I mean, you could say it's energy simply, and that makes sense also. But I always felt like, why do I have a sense of someone, right away? And when you're
Yeah.
sensitive, often there can be people that you've crossed paths with them before, but not in this earthly reality.
Well, it's so interesting. I had this one client about a year ago, and her higher self said that she needed to go to California to meet up with these two people. And we were finding out more about these people. And the higher self said those are her sons from a past life. And she was their father, but they needed that closure and she needed to see them. It was something that was supposed to help the all of them together. So fascinating. It's
Wow.
like, wow, do we do that? We usually do that. We find a way to meet up with these people, to give us some, whatever closure or connection.
Yeah, there must be so many different threads, like closure,
There are.
connection, to heal trauma, to support one another through a
Mhm.
tough patch or through life.
Right.
It's incredible. I'm sure there's some connection like between you and I. I just felt
Oh yeah.
so drawn to your work.
Well, I've learned that there's always a match between the client and practitioner.
Yeah.
For instance, I had a client that she said all her life she saw the numbers 1974 when she would be going through trauma, and she would open a book, it'd be like 1974, or she had an apartment that was 1974.
Wow.
It's just all her life. And so that was one of her questions. And her higher self said that was just to show her that this session was planned because that's my birth date. But it's
Oh
like that
my
with
goodness.
everybody.
Yeah.
But that's what I've learned. It's the people that are supposed to meet you. They've planned this. It's like an intricate web, and
Yeah.
we're just playing a game. That's all this really is. It's like a really well designed game, but we're in the physical, trying to navigate through it.
When you know that, when I know that, I should speak from the eye. When I know that that's true, there's a more organic flow available when we can let
Mhm.
go and just allow. And it's incredible who comes through the door when you do that.
I
And
know.
trust.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but this is I just highly recommend that folks read your book because it's such a great book, and there I'm sure there'll be another book coming very soon too. I want to read something from your book before, unless you have anything else you want to say or share with us.
I'm going to be speaking at the Conscious Life Expo in LA, February 4th through the 7th. And it's going to be a really fun event. So if you feel like learning more about Atlantis and Lemuria, I'm going to be giving a 90-minute presentation on that. So it's
Oh,
Conscious Life Expo.
I mean, I think I waited 6 months to get in to see you. You're busy, aren't you? Are you still taking
Yeah.
clients?
I'm going to wait to open my schedule because I'm booked until June, and I'm only waiting until my kids' new school year schedule comes out. Then I'll be able to know when I can book people or not.
Yeah, okay. This is a little passage. I think this was from your higher self, but correct me if it's wrong. The next level of consciousness will be one of equality, where we no longer look to judge or to fear others based on our differences. We will begin to veer into each other's minds and feel who a person is rather than see what a person is. We will begin to use our intuition about people more. We will begin to subtly communicate with each other using this internal voice rather than our eyes and our judgment. I just had such a warm feeling when I read that. I thought this is where we're
Thank
going, and
you.
your message is such of one of such hope and acceptance of where we are at right now and the perfection of this lifetime and all of them. So
Thank you.
thank you for speaking to us today and for doing what you're
Thank
doing in
you.
the world. And I'm just so grateful to be connected to you. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we'll see you again soon.
Okay.
Take good care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.